Hello, this is Brad Wild, and today we're starting on the admin screen of X-Plane 11. Not very exciting, but today we're going to fly the route that I programmed into the FMS in my last video, and that was a video demonstrating in greater detail than normal the programming of the ZIBO 737. So we're going to be flying from Chicago Midway, and that's Kilo Mike Delta Whiskey, down to St. Louis, Kilo Sierra Tango Lima. I'm going to set my weather to be manually configured and 0 wind speed, because I don't want to have the winds be different than they were when I program that FMS in our last video. Otherwise I'm going to have to change a lot of things. So let's just keep it the same for right now, and it will stay that way all the way down to St. Louis. And the time doesn't really matter. Maybe we could take off a little bit later in the day. For fuel, I'm just going to zero it out, and we'll enter all that in the iPad in the airplane. Alright, we've got the airplane loaded, and let's get things started. Start with our battery, over to our iPad, and let's start ground services. Connect GPU. And then we want to make some settings here for realism. We're going to go with a short IRS align time, short refuel time. I don't want to have any blown tires, so we'll kill that. For hardware configuration, the only thing I want to make sure is that my nose wheel axis is on yaw, otherwise my joystick will have no control over that nose wheel. And let's go with kilograms for our units. And back to our main screen, weight and balance. I've got 6,000 kilograms. Here's our tow weight. I'm not going to do anything with our center of gravity. And now that we've got our ground power, go ahead and turn that on. And then how about some packs? Get a little air circulation and turn on our logo light and our steady light. Don't need anti-collision just yet. And now I'm going to go ahead and program the FMS. I won't bore you with that because you've already seen it done. So we'll be back in just a second. So our FMS is now programmed as it was in the previous video. Now let's take a look at our panel down here. Let's turn on some backlighting. And let's close our door here. Not that there's anybody back there. So that light is now off. And we can turn this to TA for right now. That will be set for when we taxi. And up to our overhead panel. We'll just start down this side, turn on our yaw damper, and then our fuel switch for our APU. And this should have been on ground power. Not that it does anything in this simulation, but and continue on down to our APU, and let's go ahead and start that. And we'll see this swing up, and while we're waiting we can arm our emergency lights, fasten seat belts, and window heat. And we'll wait until our engines are fired up before we turn on our probe heat and our electrical switches, and continue on down, trim to on. These switches are all set. We will need to turn off our packs before we start the engine. Now our APU is working. We can flip this over to APU and turn on the bleed. And now we can turn off our ground power. And you can see that it is off. And continuing down this side, let's put in our altitude, flight level 260. Landing is 650. We can turn off our master caution and then move across this panel. Our baro. And our course we do not need to set just yet, but we can arm our auto throttle, and our takeoff is 143, that's V2. And even though we aren't going to really use this, we can set our heading to 040. And our initial altitude will be 2,400 feet. If you remember, we do a climbing right turn to 100 degrees and 2,400. Turn on that flight director, and then going across this panel, our rejected takeoff for our auto brake, or I should say our auto brake is set to RTO. And now we're ready to call our pushback. And we go to better pushback, and we'll just plan our pushback to here. And I believe I can just hit the enter key on my keyboard.
All right, Captain, got the directions. Let me know through the menu when you're ready.
That's right, he's really excited about this. And we are ready for pushback.
Great news, Captain. Your tow's coming.
That is good news. And while I'm here, I'm going to turn off row weather connector and gizmo. Notice my frame rates are kind of dicey right now. And we can go ahead while we're waiting and turn on our fuel switches. And next we're going to be starting those engines. I'm just scanning the panels. And he's going to ask us to release our parking brake.
All right, looks like the doors and hatches are closed and we're ready to connect.
And there he is. By the way, this is the ZIBO model 3.30i. I is a hotfix for H. So, as of today, which is the 30th of September 2018, I have the latest version.
Welcome aboard, Captain. Tow's connected, bypass pens inserted. Go ahead and kill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
Alright, parking brake is off.
Here comes the pushback. Light them up.
And he's telling us we can go ahead and get things started here. So, start engine 2. These packs need to be off. Almost forgot. And we can watch our temperatures come up, and at 25 or so we can add fuel. You can see that here. And let's go ahead and start the other engine. Again, we're watching RN2. Want to get our trim. It was 465. So that looks about right. Notice this has gone back to auto. Make sure we're stable here. We are.
Just about done here. Go ahead and set your parking brake.
All right.
And we're disconnecting the tow. Give me just a moment.
And let's go ahead and turn on our generators, and we can turn off our APU now. And I'll flip this over to Gen 2 and turn off our APU bleed. Get some air back on and turn on our probes. And how about a taxi light? And anti-collision, because we're going to be rolling. And a couple notches of flaps here.
And we're disconnected. Signal and pen on the left. Take it easy and have a safe flight.
There goes our tow. And we're ready to taxi. Brake off. I'm gonna make sure our, let's see, where was that? Settings, realism. Nope. Hardware. For some reason, let's try row. There we go. So we've got a bit of taxiing to do, so I'm going to spare you from all of that. So back in a minute. So a few things to do before we roll on runway 4 right. Let's start with our overhead panel, and how about some lights? So now we have landing lights. Taxi light we probably don't need anymore. We don't need runway turn-off lights, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on my probe, and we'll turn these to continuous spark just in case there is a problem on takeoff. And down to our center panel and turn our transponder to TATR. And let's start our timer. And we've been cleared for takeoff. I'm going to arm my VNav and LNav. Whoops, overshot that. Alright, let's get lined up here. Alright. Now that I've got it stable, adding power. Hit toga.
80 knots. V1, rotate.
Right to the end of the runway.
Awesome, great.
Gear up. Things are stable. And we can
1,000.
turn on our autopilot and begin that climbing turn. And notch of flaps up. Remember, we're just going to 2,400 feet. All right, flaps up, gear off. And we are at 2,400 feet. And we can put our auto brake back to off. And now let's increase our altitude to flight level 260. Whoops. There we go. So how do we get there? Good question. We click this little button, altitude intervention, N1, and you can see we begin to climb, nose up. So we turn towards Bacon. And on our ND you can see that it's our next destination point. And we're above the cloud cover. By the way, I've turned off SkyMax because even though the clouds look so much better, they're just not accurate in portraying the cloud cover. You'll be flying along over a ceiling and all of a sudden it just disappears. X-Plane is actually more accurate in depicting what is actually there. So we're coming around and starting to straighten out as we pick up our route. And as we hit 10,000, we hear a chime and we can turn off our landing lights. We can also turn our engine switches back to auto. And continue our climb out. Yeah, the clouds do look a little strange, but I prefer accuracy. Okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. We are just about to our top of climb, right on the money, T/C, flight level 260. And these are now without the green rectangle, making our turn here at Blocker, RBS, Romeo Bravo Sierra is our VOR, which is next, and that is our transition to our star. We are 11 miles out from Midway. Over a lot of cloud cover. Again, the latest ZIBO model. I think he must come out with at least one a week, which is fine. I wish some of the other developers were that active. So I would have to say that the ZIBO is probably one of my favorite aircraft. It is immersive, it's being constantly updated and improved, so I really enjoy it. It's about as realistic as you can get, and it gives you plenty of things to do, so I highly recommend it if you aren't. I mean, it's free. Once you get the hang of it, it's even better, so you'll have to check it out. Alright, so we'll just cruise along here, and when we get closer to our top of descent, I'll chime back in. So we're not really near our top descent yet. We're still coming up here on Wild Bull, or whatever this might be an abbreviation for, but I thought we would just take a look at our FMS, and it's showing our top of descent is 30 nautical miles, and We're due there at 23:33 Zulu time, and so we're just about 4 minutes out. So just take a quick look at our map. So we are just passing Wild Bull now and begin turning slowly to the west. Here is our approach chart, which we might want to take a look at now. The altitude that we want to be at is 5,000 feet, although we will be it looks like we're going to be intercepting the localizer and guide slope at about 2,500. And the other thing I want to do is make sure I've got my, I'm not sure what happened there, why it's blue. Anyway, you know, I find that when I'm running X-Plane, things And taking a look at our approach chart, you can see that we need to be at 5,000 feet, though it looks like we're going to intercept the guide slope. What did I say? Glide slope at 2,500. But I want to just make note of our frequency, 111.95. So back to the airplane, and we'll dial in that altitude of 5,000. And as you've heard me say before, in the ZIBO 737, it will begin the descent automatically. Contrasting to the JAR A320, you have to initiate the descent yourself. So you can see we're coming up on it. And you can see over here that we're beginning to decelerate. And getting ready to begin our descent here. Now, I should have given the seatbelt sign off, but although it's on auto now, I'm not quite sure what that does. But hopefully that was the right thing to do. And we're showing just 7 miles out. Go back to our legs here, coming up on honk, and right after that our top of descent. View out the right side of the aircraft. More clouds. Left side. This new version of the 737 by ZIBO has the split winglets. I'll have to try that one of these days. And our descent should start any moment. And there we go. Decel. You can can see our N1s coming back, beginning our descent, and then this is our indicator of where we are in our descent path. So we're just slightly above it, but that's fine. So we've begun our descent. I'm gonna change our range here. Now this is a little disconcerting. This is showing 11,000 feet. That can't be right. And then it's back to, yeah, I'm surprised I didn't notice that before, but that's not right. Petty, we need to be at 15,000. All right, well, I'll be back as we approach our flight level 180. Until then, just hang on. Sorry I wasn't paying attention, but we blew through flight level 180 and I dialed in our altimeter for St. Louis, and we are coming up on Petty, and we are to be at 1688. And Kaya, we need to be at 15. So one of the more recent things I've seen in ZIBO are these numbers right from the FMS on the ND adjacent to the waypoint. Our indicator here, our descent path indicator, is right on the money. Altitude is armed, 5,000 feet. Still overcast. Different view. Kyra. And you can see we are headed almost west, and then we're going to turn and head northwest so we can come back and pick up that runway 11. And let's see, dialed in our 111.95 on both radios. And I want to dial in 123. Not really close to 11, should be more like runway 12, but anyway, let me dial that in on course. Oh, it is. And we continue to deaccelerate, so I've got 123 on both. And 11,000 is our target for Jack. So why don't we get back together as we get to our 10,000 foot mark. So we have hit 10,000 and need to get our landing lights on. And notice our speed has dropped to 240. We just need to be below 250. And you can see our route here rather nicely. Kind of this big U-turn. So kind of a nice slow descent. Look out over the nose so you can see the Mississippi River here. And we should begin our turn shortly to the northwest. There we go. I think this might be the Missouri River here. So that puts the Mississippi behind us. Getting our finishing our turn to the northwest. We can zoom in a little bit closer. Alright, I'll come back after we've made our turn at Hardy and we're approaching our localizer. Alright, we have made our turn at Hardy and we're headed towards our initial approach fix of Socide. I have dialed in the glide slope intercept altitude of 2,500 feet, and now I'm watching our localizer and glide slope diamonds, and when they light up or become active I can switch to approach mode. And I am at a point where I can put in a notch of flaps. And I can dial in a speed of 180. And it looks like I probably need to put on our approach. Our glide slope diamond is filled. Oh, there, our localizer is filled too. So it's swinging across, and you can see we're tracking just fine. So we are still about 10 miles out, 12 miles out, maybe even more. So you can see our localizer is engaged. We're coming up on our glide slope. and a couple notches of flaps. So, localizer and glide slope. And this is indicating that we have dialed in the speed on our MCP. And we're in the soup. See the runway off in the distance now. Another notch of flaps, and let's drop our speed to 160. We're still a ways out. But the report had clouds at overcast at 3,600 feet, so we're just breaking out of that. There we go. And let's put our gear down. Now let's take our speed down to V-rough. Careful, Brad. And now that we have our landing lights out, oops, didn't mean to do that, or our landing gear down, let's turn on our taxi lights, runway lights, just turn it all on, alright? And you can see that we're still on our localizer and glide slope, and I can switch to our second. Autopilot. I probably should have done that sooner, but we are right on the money. Land 1,000
feet, stabilized, Mr. Burchell.
or land, what is that? Land 3. Alright, let's turn off our auto throttle.
500, 400, 300, 200, 100, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Whoops, we're floating, folks. Alright. Reverse green. One thing I forgot was
80 knots.
auto brake. Good thing we have a nice long runway here. So I missed one thing there. And reverse off. And before we taxi onto the runway, we'll stop and clean things up. So we don't need our landing lights anymore. And let's see, and we'll start putting up our flaps. We still have our spoilers up. So lower those. So I pulled up the map and you can see where we need to go in this general direction. So we'll begin our trek. And when we get a little closer to the gate, you can join me. But it looks like we've got a ways to taxi. So, stand by. Alright, here we come to the gate. Someday I've got to do the auto gate thing, because then I'd have a marshaller out here helping me. Alright, here we are. Not too bad. And let's see if we can get some ground power going. There we go, and we can cut our engines. So they spool down. Well, thanks for joining me as we finally made that flight, a continuation of programming the FMS, and I am happy to report that the latest version of ZIBO seems pretty steady. I didn't see any problems or issues. So, until next time, Bread Wild.